Sonic peeled open his eyes. Wherever he was, it was mercifully dim, and although his head pounded, his leg throbbed, and his back stung, he tried to be grateful for the small mercy of darkness. He sat up and shivered as the damp air brushed against his skin. Draped over him was a thin and oddly warm foil sheet, and he pulled it over his shoulders. Leaning his back against the wall, he inhaled sharply. Something brushed against his side, and he froze. He slowly turned his head, then exhaled as he saw it was only Metal Sonic, who sat perfectly still with his optics disabled. He rubbed his temples and tried to think, despite the pain. He should have died from blood loss, and yet here he was. He ran his finger over the cable and bloody tissue tied to his chest. Metal must have used it to stop the bleeding and saved him. Yet, Metal had also betrayed him. Not that it had done him any good. In the end, Sonic had to save Metal from the magnet. Metal must have returned the favor, or at least kept him alive because he was useful. Although, maybe he was assuming too much. Maybe Metal didn't have a reason for his actions. Metal was a machine. He only reacted. He didn't think. Sonic grasped his throat. It stung as he felt the dryness in his breath. He was desperately thirsty, and he needed water. He went to stand, then remembered his leg. He had avoided looking at it, but there was only so much he could do to procrastinate. He closed his eyes, then pulled the blanket off his legs. As the cold air swept over him, he gingerly opened one eye. His leg was pale and swollen, and nearly all color had drained from below the knee. His knee itself was bent at an impossible angle, and the mere sight of it sent a wave of agony over him. He started to shake. Even with treatment, the road to recovery would be long. He may never run again. His future flashed before his eyes. He would spend the rest of his life confined to a chair, watching his friends run free, and playing board games with Tails and losing. Sonic slapped his forehead. He had to stop. Panicking would not help. He took a deep breath. As they say, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few legs. His voice echoed through the room, then died as silence filled his ears. Water. He needed to focus on water. He would be okay if he could only get a drink. Looking around the room, he spotted a basin sink in the corner with an oil-spotted towel lining the rim. He heaved himself aside and crawled along the floor. His legs scraped behind him, and although he was dizzy and numb from shock, pangs of agony spread up his leg as he moved. He couldn't stop. He was Sonic the Hedgehog, and Sonic the Hedgehog never stopped. He winced through the pain. As he reached the sink, sweat poured through his quills, despite the cold. He threw the towels on the ground and slammed the faucet. It sputtered as yellow, murky water streamed down. He paused. Maybe the water would run clear if he waited. No, that wouldn't work. That would require stopping, and he was desperately thirsty. He threw his mouth under the stream and gulped as water flowed down his throat. It tasted utterly disgusting, dusty and dirty, and he gagged as the smell of sulfur filled his nose. Taking several more gulps, he forced the water down, then fell back to coughing. Each cough aggravated his injuries, and pain overwhelmed him as he laid on the ground, shivering and convulsing. He never imagined it was possible to be this cold. He felt it in his bones, and he cursed the sweat that covered his fur, in spite of the cold air. He looked back towards Metal. He had foolishly left the blanket by Metal's side. Crawling along the floor, he collapsed again as he reached the blanket. He drew it around his shoulders, then propped himself against the wall. His fur brushed Metal's side and he winced, preemptively bracing himself for even more coldness. However, he didn't feel anything cold. Instead, Metal's frame was warm, so warm it was almost hot. Sonic bolted upright, putting several inches between himself and Metal, and cast a side glance at his robotic counterpart. The damp air relentlessly brushed his fur, and despite huddling in the blanket, Sonic shivered again. The cold was endless, and he could just not escape it. He hesitantly lifted his arm and placed a single finger on Metal's chest. There was no doubt about it. Metal was warm. Although Sonic had expected Metal to be cold, upon reflection, this made more sense. A car was hot when it operated, and so was a computer. Electronics generated heat, and Metal was no exception. He pressed his whole hand onto Metal's chest and scooted over a single inch. He was a breath away from Metal, although only his hands touched him. Glancing at Metal's optical screens, he saw it was completely deactivated, and Metal hadn't responded to his touch. Maybe Metal was just off? Sonic didn't understand how robots operated, but he appeared unresponsive. He shivered again, and his every nerve had the same demand. He bit his lip as he glanced back at Metal and waved his hand in front of Metal's screen. No response. Glancing behind him, Sonic saw he was plugged into the wall. Metal must be recharging and was therefore deactivated. This implied Metal wouldn't even notice if Sonic borrowed some of his heat. Sonic glanced aside, paused, and then pressed his entire side into Metal. Precious heat sunk into his skin, and Sonic closed his eyes and exhaled. He took a moment to feel the cold creeping away from his body. As he laid still, he felt utterly exhausted and generally horrible. His mind wandered to his back, then to his headache, and settled on his leg. He tried to quiet his thoughts, and right as he felt sleep creeping over him, he felt something stir to his side. He glanced up. Metal's optics glowed above him. "Sonic, I have a question for you." Sonic bolted, then yelped as he mistakenly placed weight on his injury. This isn't what... I can explain," Sonic said. "Why, Sonic? I can't do it. Why can't I do it?" Sonic said as he managed to scoot away an inch. "This time I should have won. You were nearly dead." Metal fell to the floor and curled towards him. "But by some sick twist of fate, I saved you. I saved you when I should have killed you." Metal dropped his head and stared at the floor. "Why, Sonic? Why?" He was close enough for Sonic to see each of the discrete analog lines that made up his eyes. You don't have to kill me, you know? You could just, not kill me and..." Sonic paused. What was he doing? He should be on the offensive, not cowering like an idiot. In fact, he should be angry. "Hey, what's up with that anyway? I thought we had an agreement, but you had to go and try to kill me." Metal looked at the floor. "My actions back there were suboptimal. My systems have automatically pruned that branch from the decision tree accordingly." What does that even mean?" Sonic stared at him, but as Metal continued to look at the floor, Sonic groaned. "Come on, Metal. We were supposed to work together. If we want to get out of here, you need to help me." Metal looked up and his eyes flickered. "I need to help you?" "Yes, you do. That's how it's supposed to work. I help you, and you help me." Metal looked down again, and Sonic rubbed his eyes. He didn't know why he was even trying. Metal looked at his hands. "If I'm supposed to escape, then I need to help you. And if I need to help you..." He took a step towards Sonic. "Then I need to fix your leg." Sonic sat upright. You can do that? Really?" Metal pointed to the glass tube in the center of the room and said nothing. Sonic squinted. The container stretched from floor to ceiling, and it sat in a mess of tangled wires. A computer terminal dotted with multiple buttons stood in the center. His eyes widened. He hadn't noticed it before, but as Metal pointed it out, he recalled the device from his youth. He had thought Eggman had given up on the technology after it proved to have too many complications, but there it stood, the nightmare from his past, and it was in remarkable condition. "I never thought I'd see one of those again. His stomach tightened. "That's a roboticizer." Metal went to speak, but Sonic held up his hand. "No, we are not turning me into a robot." Before Metal could protest, Sonic elevated his voice. "Period. End of discussion." Metal threw his hands in the air. "That's not the plan. Transforming you would only make you loyal to Dr. Eggman Nega, and it would hardly help my escape." Sonic tilted his head. "Well then, what is the plan?" Metal rolled his eyes, and Sonic huffed. He did not appreciate Metal patronizing him. "We roboticize your leg and nothing else. You will be able to run and fight again, and your personality will not be affected." Sonic covered his face with his hands and groaned. "Can you even do that? That's not how it usually works." "You're right. Partial robotization rarely works. Subjects lose connection with the limb, as the body's nerve endings and neural connections in the brain fail to interact with the electronic components. But..." Metal glanced at the machine. "It is fortunate I re-indexed my hard drive. I can probably derive the necessary modifications to integrate your nerves with the new limb. I estimate an 84.26% chance of success." Sonic pulled his hands down. "And what happens in that other 15%? Metal leaned down to Sonic's level. "I think you already know." Sonic gulped as his stomach twisted. He felt sick. No, absolutely not. Your idea is horrible. Metal knelt down and placed his hand over Sonic's shoulder. You are surely aware that an injury of this magnitude usually leads to the full loss of the limb. You will never run again, even if we escape. Sonic pushed Metal's hands away. His nausea was growing. That is, of course, assuming you survive at all. Remember, before modern medicine, broken bones routinely led to death after they became infected. But surely there's something else you could do? Well, if the infection spreads, there is that old technique invented by combat medics, amputation. Sonic stared with his mouth agape. Without anesthetic. Sonic shifted his weight and cried as he rolled over his leg. He buried his face in his hands. Running was his life. If he couldn't run... He took a sharp breath and choked. We need to get out of here, he laughed, though his voice wavered. Even if it costs me an arm and a leg. Metal nodded. Give me a few minutes. Sonic sat on the terrible, freezing floor, hugging himself with his arms, and watched as Metal walked over to the machine. Metal leaned over the terminal and ran his hand over the dusty surface. He then popped open a small door on the side of his chest, pulled out a cable, and plugged it into the machine. He paused and stood with his arms crossed. Nearly a minute passed, and Metal hadn't moved. What exactly are you doing? Sonic asked. I am implementing the modifications. By standing there? Software controls this machine's behavior. I am rewriting it to do what we want. After several additional minutes, Metal added, Software modifications complete. Initiate hardware modifications. He unplugged himself and walked over to the tube. Looking down at the floor, he kicked his steel foot through the glass. It shattered, and Metal knelt down. He scraped away the broken shards, leaving a jagged hole the size of his soul. Modifications complete. We need to place your injured limb inside the machine. Great, I'll be right there, Sonic said. He prepared to crawl, but his leg cracked beneath him as he rolled. Pain shot up his back, and he cried out. Metal said nothing as he returned to Sonic. Kneeling down, he placed one arm behind Sonic's back and the other under his leg. Metal looked at Sonic expectantly, and Sonic groaned, then lifted his arms over Metal's shoulders. Once secured, Metal lifted him slowly, and Sonic bit his lip as his leg shifted in the air. Metal returned to the glass and, after setting Sonic on the floor, placed his hands over Sonic's injured leg. I am warning you, this will hurt. A lot. I will begin the robotization process immediately to reduce the pain. Tell me when you're ready. Sonic closed his eyes and gulped. When he opened them again, he looked back at Metal. Metal nodded, and Sonic must have looked concerned, because Metal placed his hands over his shoulder. Sonic choked. Give me a break. Is that a yes? Sonic nodded. Metal forced Sonic's leg straight, and the bone cracked. Sonic screamed and bit down on his hand. With one hand placed on his back, Metal pushed his leg into the tube. Sonic shuddered as he failed to hold back the tears and sobbed. And it wasn't the pain that made him cry. Metal leaped up and slammed the switch. Electricity sparked in waves along the glass as the machine hummed, showering blue and white sparks on his leg. His pain subsided gradually, and a tingling, static sensation scratched his leg. He peeled open one eye, then immediately closed it as the bright sparks overwhelmed his vision. The roboticizer works by rearranging the chemical makeup of organic structures. Iron molecules undergo sublimation as they ionize into gas. The existing physiological structures absorb the iron molecules, creating synthetic structures along the same paths. Incidentally, this is why the robotization process is irreversible. The molecular reaction causes a distinct loss of cellular information. Sonic clenched his head. His mind was racing, and it was all he could do to suppress his panic. He was thirsty, he was sick, he was in pain. So much pain. Metal glanced at Sonic, then monitored the terminal in silence. After a few minutes, the pain in Sonic's leg subsided entirely. The sensation and awareness of his leg actually increased as the robotization continued, and his leg in the machine began to feel more real than his leg on the floor. He shuddered. Sonic, do you feel any pain in your leg? Metal said over the roar of the machine. No, it feels fine now. In fact, it feels great. It feels great. Metal threw the switch. The machine coasted to a halt, and the sparks faded like dying embers. Sonic saw it. His dirty and tired face looked back at him from the reflective, blue steel that was his former leg. But that wasn't quite right. That wasn't his former leg. That was his leg. He kept staring at his leg, and it stared back at him. Finally, his gaze was broken when Metal pulled him from the machine and placed him on his feet. After Sonic continued to stare, Metal said, "Was it successful? Can you move your leg?" Sonic watched his leg kick. It responded to his will, and he could even feel the floor when his leg returned to rest. It hadn't gone horribly wrong. Not yet. He took a single step forward, then another step. He was amazed at how natural it felt. His leg was considerably heavier, yet it took no additional effort to move. It worked! And the pain's gone! Sonic clutched his head. Well, the pain in my leg at least. He looked up at Metal. This is still my leg, right? I mean, the pieces are just rearranged, but they're still the same pieces. Yes and no. That's not really how that works. Uh-huh. The molecules in your leg are in a completely different state now. Particles only have a few things that differentiate them. Spin, charge, velocity, and so on. The state of everything in your leg has obviously changed. Your question is nonsensical. You cannot tell two particles apart when they are in the same state, because they only exist as points in their respective fields. There is no difference, not even in principle, between a brand new electron and one created in the Big Bang if they... Sonic pulled his ears to his head. Stop! Sorry I asked. A familiar voice, distorted by radio static, cut him off.
There you are! I found you, my favorite pet. You couldn't hide forever. Oh no!
Nega, Sonic said, and he heard Metal say the same.
Huh, how rude though. You two are completely ignoring the rules of my glorious maze. For shame. Such bad manners. I'll just have to show you why breaking the rules is not acceptable.
Sonic backed into Metal and stopped. He shuddered. This was all very familiar, and last time it hadn't ended well. The room shook as the walls grumbled. Sonic heard a snap, followed by a roar of rushing water. It poured through the cracks in the steel-plated walls, and Sonic lifted his organic foot as the cold water leaked through his shoe. Sonic laughed. Hey Nega, didn't you know? You can lead a hedgehog to water, but you can't make him drink! Sonic looked down at his new robotic foot, and Nega's laugh boomed in return.
Are you sure about that, Sonic? Because I think you already have.